author of CDO, Chief Daddy Officer, The Business of Fatherhood, who decodes business principles for personal success. Chris is the founder and CEO of, I need reading glasses now, SRXA Strategic Pharmaceutical Advisors. He's the host of Voice America Radio's Straight Up with Chris, Real Talk on Business and Parenthood, and a visiting professor at Georgetown University's McDonough School of Business and George Mason University School of Management on Negotiation and Leadership. Persephone Efesiou Maglaya is the director of bridal fashion and retail at Wedding Wire in Chevy Chase. Persephone creates media campaigns with all major bridal fashion designers and orchestrates strategic partnerships with both designers and local bridal salons. She's a contributing author to CDO Chief Daddy Officer, and each quarter she returns to her alma mater, George Mason University, as a guest speaker on negotiations. Chris and Persephone will speak to us on decoding business principles for personal success. Please welcome them.
Hello, everybody. And thank you very much for having us with you today. It was almost 24 years ago, almost exactly to the day, that something happened, something I saw, changed the way that I looked at my professional life and my business life and personal life, always and forever. What happened was this article. This was the inaugural issue of Fortune magazine's issue of the decade, January 1 of 1990, and the lead article says, "Why grade A executives get an F as parents." That caught my attention, but what really annoyed me, and the more I read about it, it astonished me, was the card written by the father to the son. "Dear son, enjoy the gift. Sorry I won't be around for Christmas. Love, Dad." And a key to a new Porsche. Now, I was 30 years old at the time, maybe a little bit more than that. I would salivate over a key to a new Porsche, or a used one for that. But the point is that you cannot replace a father-son, father-daughter, parent-child relationship with an inanimate object. It just cannot happen. And while I was annoyed about it, I figured, well, turn something negative into a positive, and I vowed never to be a parent that will go even close to that. You see, by day I was a fast-rising executive in the pharmaceutical industry, and by night I was 2-year-old Persephone's full-time dad. While I was not an A-plus parent, I certainly was not an F parent and vowed never even to go anywhere near there. But kind of life works in mysterious ways, and as it would turn out, my vow to kind of keep my work so that I work to earn enough to support my family as opposed to working for work's sake came back to me to pay me back in spades, because a few years later, after a divorce, 10-year-old Persephone decides that she will stay with me full-time.
So I'm sure some of you are sitting here thinking, what's the deal with mom nursing? So I'm 26 years old, and for the past 10 years I've had a nice relationship with my mom. Now growing up, it's kind of interesting because I'm observing my peers, and they're going to get manicures with their moms, and fighting with their moms, and going garage shopping, but I never felt like I was missing out on anything because I just went with my dad instead, and though that may be a little bit odd, I never felt like I wasn't fulfilled in any way. So, I mean, he braided hair, as you can see there. He cooked, he cleaned, he did manicures for me. He went bra shopping with me, and though some people would be mortified at the idea of telling their dad about their menstrual cycle, I was the little girl picking up the phone, calling, saying what I needed from CVS. So, hey, you gotta do what you have to do. So, I don't usually share that piece of information to 125, 150 strangers. However, However, I do feel it is an integral component in understanding our story and in understanding how we become so close and gotten to this point.
Now, I have to say here that taking a 11-year-old to buy her first training bra that she insists that it will be bought from Victoria's Secret, it's a really humbling experience. It just gets you right there at ground level where you belong. So I don't know who trained who, but there was just an awful lot of cross-training happening. And training I needed because at that time, becoming a single dad, I did not necessarily know much about parenting, but I did know a thing or two about business. And I knew that the things I knew about business had served me pretty well. So what I did was I fell back on what I knew best, business. In business, there are two things you cannot delegate. All of us who are in business know that if you delegate smartly, lots of things get done a whole lot faster. Two things cannot be delegated. One is your presence. You cannot delegate that. I don't care how good you are. If you figured out a way, I want to know. And so I made it my business to be where Persephone needed me to be and be there whenever I could physically and be there 24/7 emotionally. I called that the art of being there. And there were times where I found myself kind of getting too close and having a almost teenage Persephone kind of wanted to push me away because now you can't be seen with your dad or mom or whomever. It was not cool. And so I perfected the art of being there from a distance. And that had served well. So because you cannot delegate you have, especially in today's technology, you can have other avenues of putting your presence there. We talk about we're too busy with emails and texts and so on and so forth, but you know, everyone has, or most everyone has a smartphone, and that smartphone does have either an app for Skype or a FaceTime kind of thing. Why not get to your kid that way, wish them well before an exam, before a soccer game, before something or other? Now, my example was a little bit different. This was, you know, in the ice age of dinosaurs, pre-internet. The gentleman is laughing, he understands what I'm saying. And so I was in a 3-continent globe-trotting trip that lasted 2 weeks. I was supposed to land back in Washington on a Sunday evening, and at the same time, on that Sunday evening at 5 o'clock, Persephone was supposed to be participating in her first ever Halloween pageant, dressed as an angel. So I'm 2 days back away from my return, and the fact that I'll be missing her debut on the stage just didn't settle very well with me. So back then, again, the Ice Age, the only thing that you could do was the phone, rerouted myself. I don't even remember through how many countries and so on and so forth. The bottom line was, it is now Sunday evening, 5 o'clock, and Persephone walks onto the stage. A church hall it was, slightly larger than this, and as she came up on the stage, she was scanning the back of the room. She knew very well that I wasn't going to be there because Daddy was supposed to be flying in at about that time. The back door opens and I walk in. Our eyes locked. What that did for our relationship then and to this day cannot be underscored. So the art of being there is something that is really, that one can really take heart to, and you can apply it in just about every way.
So I promise this picture serves a purpose other than just embarrassing my dad. It is relevant to the next story that I'm going to share with you about how he really was always there. And really and truly, whether it was a social function or a dance recital or just a quick text in the morning, he was always present and available for me. One time in particular, while I was in college, I was dating a punk guy, a very punk guy, and he broke up with me the week of finals. And of course, I'm hysterical, and the only person I want to talk to is my dad. So I shot him a quick text message. By the way, there's a 14-hour time difference between DC and Thailand. And he was in a meeting, and my phone rings instantly. It's him. He stepped outside of a meeting that he was hosting and was on the phone with me, comforting me, giving me all those calm words and those pieces of advice that I needed to just be able to move on with the day and move on with my life. And just hearing his voice made me feel like I wasn't so alone. I will say, now being in business myself, stepping out of a meeting for an hour, hour and a half to listen to some girl hysterically crying, that's a little tough, and rearranging your schedule to make sure that you're there. Also, I think I appreciate that now more than I did back then, but he did it effortlessly.
Taking an unscheduled 90-minute break from a business meeting and talking to your daughter from a bathroom in Bangkok, it's my kind of business meeting. But you got to do what you got to do. 30,000-foot view. We've all flown there. We have all experienced that in business books. Hopefully we've experienced it in our place of business. We have at least heard of it. What happens at the 30,000-foot view? You're about 6 miles above ground, and you're sitting in the airplane. When you look out the window, what are you impressed by? It is not that you're 6 miles above ground. It is that your viewing field is unobstructed. You can see as far as the eye can see, literally. And so what happens at that point? What happens is this. You do not get derailed by the minutia that happens at ground level. This is the strategy, we call it in business. These are the tactics. The tactics need to be somewhere related to a strategy, because if they're not worth their salt. So I'm a pilot, and I kind of had a vested interest in that thing. I understood it better. And I set a strategy for what I wanted to do with my home life. My strategy was to raise a happy, well-adjusted, unentitled, productive adult. And then Thank you very much. How did I do it? Most of us set out to raise a child. No, that child will be emancipated either at age 18 or 21 or whatever the law tells you that they are. The bottom line is that your child and you will have a far longer adult relationship than you will have a parent-child relationship. And there's an awful lot of other things that fall into that, but suffice it to say that if your strategy is to raise an adult, you go about parenting in a whole lot of different way than you go about it if you're raising a child.
All right, so though he's painted a beautiful picture of me, I too was a teenager at one point or another. And I'm not going to sit here and lie to your faces and tell you that I was an angel all the time and was so obedient. No, I pushed the envelope. I also had my fair share of antics and tantrums and all of those fun things that happen when you're a teenager. But in our household, he had actually not very many rules, surprisingly enough, even though he's a good father. No, we really didn't have too many rules. He encouraged me to push those boundaries, to ask questions, to say, I don't understand this, or I don't know why I need to be doing this, and he would always answer me with a question, versus a dictatorship where it's, I'm the parent, you're the child, listen to what I do, and that's it. Not how it worked in my house. So he tested me, or I'm sorry, I tested him rather, and was tested by him. But I respected the fact that he would give me some sort of real, thoughtful answer. So I respected the limits and expectations that were put before me. And since there weren't really very many rules, it was pretty doable, especially as a teenager.
Leading by example. Adults and children, all of us, studies show that we learn and retain 90% of what we see and only 10% of what we hear. Anybody disagree with that? What do you think that does to the people you manage at work? You can't have two sets of rules. It's no longer good to say, I'm the boss, I can do this, but you can't. Now, I'm not talking about perks. And the boss at home is the parent, make no mistake about it, it's not the kid. I'm pretty liberal, but that will be suicidal. You are the boss, but there are certain things, your executive perks at home, that of course your child is not allowed to do. But you cannot, on matters of ethics and goodness, close to your values, tell your child, it's okay for me to do it, but not for you. Do as I say, not as I do. That goes right out the window. What you need to do instead is you need to model your own behavior. And because they're the ultimate mimes, they will imitate the behavior. They will imitate good, they'll imitate bad. So, err to the good. An example, there are many, but an example that happened to me that I'll share with you is this. Back in the Ice Age, again, when we used to carry change in our pockets, when the plastic was not what it is today, I had an industrial-sized jar, not unlike that one, in my closet. And every night when I'll come home from work and I'll get undressed, I'll just pull whatever change was in there and drop it in the jar. Well, over the course of time, a significant amount of change went in there, which amounted, I understood, to some significant amount of money. Persephone comes in my closet one day and she says, you know, Dad, what's that? I told her. She says, yeah, what are you going to do with it? I said, I don't know. Can I have it? Have you ever heard that before? I said, sure. Here's the catch. You have to count the money and put it in tubes, coin tubes. You have to count it all, tell me how much it is. You can keep 60%. You can leave 40% aside and donate it. Why do I have to do that? Because you have to donate it to those less fortunate than us. She argued with me, lost the argument. So, long story short, the tubes are all packed on the floor. She takes brown bags, the lunch bags, puts several tubes in each bag, puts those bags in a big duffel bag, her share and the giveaway share, puts that in the car, and it's the day after Thanksgiving or some such time during that weekend, and we drive to McPherson Square in Washington, where an awful lot of Washington's homeless live. And so we pull by the park, and she rolls her window down, and there's this cute girl, holding out bags, brown paper bags, that people thought it was food, but it was money. And they came from everywhere, picking up the bags and being incredibly kind and generous with their thoughts and actions and everything else. At some point, I see that she is giving out more than what she should have been giving out, and I said nothing. We finished, rolled the window up. Now, if you have ever had an early teen, you kind of know this kind of look in the car, as if I'm all spent, I don't have any more interest in anything. So I said, Persephone, what do you think of this? Well, it was okay. Tell me about it. She said, it was fine. I said, you understand that...
It's very articulate then.
Yes. You understand that you gave away more than what you were supposed to give away. You gave away some of your money. She says, yeah, I know, which I knew she knew. I said, why'd you do that? She says, Dad, it made me feel good. Roll forward 5 years later. And here is the mimicking thing. She is now a freshman in college. This is 2005, started late August. A week later, Hurricane Katrina happens. And so she comes to me and she asks for some money. And she says, I asked her what it was for. She says, well, I need to buy some supplies. I went to the dean of students and I got permission to do a drive to get some money for the Katrina victims. Lofty goal, terrific networking, the whole thing, it just gelled in my head beautifully. She says, and I'm naming it spare change for change. So in 3 days, she organized the whole thing, and buckets of change came home that we then took to the bank, cashed them in, whatever. Long story short, it was just over $1,000 of a donation that we made to the Red Cross on the students' behalf for the relief of Hurricane Katrina.
So, as you know, at this point, my example was my dad. And what I know about my dad at that point was that all I saw was him being this really strong sales guy. He could negotiate and sell the hell out of anything to anybody. And at 6 or 7, he started with one of my favorite dad phrases, where he said to me, "Persephone, the fastest way to the C-suite is through sales." I was 6 or 7 years old, and in my mind at that point, I thought that maybe he was talking about a really beautiful hotel room with this huge alphabet letter C sitting somewhere within it. I couldn't figure it out. But something stuck with me because, as he said before, monkey see, monkey do, all I saw was his behaviors and his actions. So I was 7 or 8, and I was a Girl Scout. And of course, we were selling cookies, and we were given a goal as a troop, and then you're given a personal goal. And I remember coming home and being like, "Dad, I'm gonna annihilate everyone else. I'm gonna beat everybody else. I'm gonna get that extra badge, that extra good girl. Good job, Persephone, pat on the back. Awesome. Can I come to the office, and can I also, maybe ask your employees if they'll buy some cookies?" Sure. Well, I started there and was able to pretty much convince everybody to buy from me. But there was 11 floors in that building, and I knew there was many offices, so I went floor to floor, office to office, and cubicle to cubicle at 7 or 8, asking if these people would buy cookies. So suffice it to say, I was the #1 Girl Scout in my troop, and also sold the most cookies in Maryland at that point. Now, fast forward a little bit. So I'm 13 years old, and he asked me to come with him on a negotiation for a new car. All I heard was come and car, and I was sold, I suppose. So all I remember was the feeling, this exhilarating feeling after leaving there. He left with a brand new car. I saw the sales rep kind of sweating a little bit, because he was getting nervous if he was going to make the sale or not. I also remember that he was very firm as to his requests and where he stood, and he wouldn't back down. And I remember obviously driving away in the car and just feeling some sort of empowerment. Now, speed it up a couple years later, and I'm sitting across from the same exact sales rep at the same exact dealership, negotiating my own car, smaller size than the one that I had seen 10 years before. And I remembered 3 principles that came to me from that previous experience, and they all flashed before me, and I actually remember sharing it with my husband at the time too. The first was, Persephone, do not test drive the car, go directly to the sales rep. Did it, fine. The second was, make sure that you predetermine the range of the payment that you want to be paying every single month, and if they don't fall within that range, number 3, you need to be prepared to walk away. I won that deal too. So I walked away with a car, I followed all of these different things, but it's amazing how he took everyday moments to make them teaching moments by showing me versus just telling me. And something as small as, can you come to the dealership with me, I'm getting a car. I actually applied those very small tidbits, those little nuggets, now every day. And I walked away with a car, so it did work.
Absolutely. And you probably got a better deal than I did. Leadership. Leadership does not come from your authority, and it does not come from your direction. It comes from your ability to influence others, to follow you in your example, and lead them to wherever it is that you are going. So, we know how that applies at work. We have the leadership plans, we have the training manuals and everything else. But how does that apply to your home base, your children, your family in general? it was always well known to me, and in fact, it scared me more than very few things have in the past, that children will mindlessly follow somebody because that somebody is leading. Well, that's fine, but that's how the Branch Davidians got into David Koresh in Waco, Texas, and you know every other thing that has happened in the past that people were exceptionally good at influencing, but the followers were not good at all at questioning the authority or the influence that was being exerted upon them. So my thing was question the authority and do not follow just because somebody is leading. As a matter of fact, unless you're a cow, don't follow a herd.
Love that.
And so what you do for a child is you want to help them lead themselves. My example came with her when we were in Boston. She was 10, 11, some such thing, and we're entering a mall. It was wintertime. Your typical mall, one central revolving door, two side doors on the side. About 100 plus people in a very fat line going all the way back from the revolving door. We dutifully went to the end of the line. She got comfortable. I kind of looked around. I grabbed her by the hand and walked to the side of the line, all the way to the front, open one of the side doors, usher her in, walk in behind her. You would have thought I killed people. She turns around mortified. How could you do this? This is not a polite thing. Other people are waiting in line. Why are we here? Why did you jump the line? So I kind of look over my shoulder and I turned her shoulders so that she could be facing the same thing. And what she is seeing is this. Both side doors now are totally open. People are funneling in there. Very few, if anybody, is waiting to enter the revolving door. She is a little bit puzzled because now, should I be pissed at that or still mortified? I don't know which. I said, what are you saying? She says, people are walking in. Why? I said, because people have a herd mentality. She says, what is that? I said, people are following people because somebody led the way. This is a good example, and I articulated the ones that may not be as good. Because in my mind, leadership is as much about knowing when to lead as it is about knowing when not to follow.
So my leader and my blueprint was my dad, and what I knew is what exactly I saw. So in the morning, he was there to wake me up, take me to the bus stop, make me breakfast, etc. And in the evening, during the day, he was, this CEO. He was running his company, running his employees, and then he was still there for me in the evening to tuck me in at night and do my homework with me as well. Not in that order. As women, what we often find, what we often hear, is we have choices. We have two choices. We have family or we have career. And you can't get both. No. Well, for me, that's counter to what I've known my entire life. And so for me, I think that it's going with the herd if I were to not question this and not think about it differently. So my life's goal is to make sure that both happen. And thus far, I think I've done an okay job. Maybe that will change when I'm back here in a year. But no, in all reality, I think that it's completely possible to go against the grain and to give your 100% of your time to your family when you're with your family, and 100% of your time to your colleagues when you're at work. And then you are winning both ways.
Empowerment. What does empowerment mean at work? In business, we know it as decision-making support. You have the data that you need to arrive at a certain decision. And usually it flows like this. In business, we have a vision, we look at the data available, we take calculated risks, and we execute. Nothing ever happens till somebody sells something. Nothing ever happens until some switch is flipped on. It is that action that creates the reaction downstream. We find an awful lot of people. I've seen it in the professional life, and I was committed to the degree I could, steer my daughter away from that, who want to have all the information before they can make a decision. Well, that's good. We all want that. Nobody wants to make the wrong decision. But I don't remember very many times that I was actually able to make a decision with more than 52, 53% confidence on what I was looking at in front of me. Have I made mistakes? Absolutely. But I have taken more shots that hit in the bullseye than those that missed it. And the only way that you can be in the bullseye, center, or anywhere in the periphery is if you shoot. Aiming doesn't get you there. You see, business and parenting are both very, very similar in that neither is a passive exercise. Oftentimes we want to give our children the answers. What do you think I should do? Should I do this? How should I do this? Yeah, here's how you do it, and you give them the answer. It's easy for us. I mean, especially if you have multiple children, you invented the wheel out in the first one, just replicate it in the next, and so on and so forth. They love it because they don't have to engage their brain. Hey, I just want to check the mark, off I go. But what have you taught them? So rather than giving them answers, I give them options. And here are some of the options I gave her. Here's Persephone coming to me about April or so of her senior year in high school. She says, Dad, I'm a little bit stressed out. I've applied to all the schools I was going to apply to, blah, 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 and I think I'm considering taking a year off in between high school and college. What do you think? And I said, I think that's a wonderful idea. I think this is the time, the only time perhaps in your life, where you can take a year off without having much to worry about and do something that will be an incredible thing for yourself and also will benefit others. What do you plan to do, honey? Well, I'm going to work retail at Nordstrom's, and I am going to take some courses at Nova. Now, nothing wrong with Nova, except old flunky boyfriend was going there, and that had me worried. So I gave her again the spiel that while I'm willing and able and happy to finance your education, I will not finance your vacation, and what you're telling me sounds like a vacation to me. No, I won't do that. You can't do that. But here are two things you can do. You can join AmeriCorps, or you can join the Peace Corps. She had no idea what either of those organizations were. You know, deer in the headlights, glassy-eyed, and so on and so forth. End result, August rather, she starts college and gets out 4 years later.
Well, I did a quick Google search and finally realized what the difference was between the two, but what was really most important to me was that there was no ability to blow dry my hair, there was no outlets, there was no straightening iron, so I guess college it was. So when I came to terms with that decision, going to college that is, we had a discussion, and he said, Persephone, I really want you to apply to Northeastern. That was his alma mater, and he sat on the board there. And I had a visceral reaction to that. I was like, no, that's just not happening. And he raised a leader, right? We kind of came to blows at times in regards to that, because why I had such an issue with that is that it wasn't based on merit, and I didn't feel like it was my decision. The decision had been made for me when they accepted him several years beforehand. And that just didn't sit well with me. Now, fast forward a couple of years, and he's in pharmaceuticals, and he has paved his path. He's made that decision, and has been empowered to do so. And for me, I picked fashion, and I've gone in that direction, and that's okay. But some people will come to me and say to me, Persephone, why don't you just work in pharma so that then you can take over your dad's business? That's not appealing to me, because it's two different destinies and two completely different paths. What I will say about my dad is that he's always been supportive of anything that I wanted to do. He's always helped me pave the way as far as where I wanted to go. He would always help me out and provide me with the guidance that I needed in order to get there.
business plans. Who hasn't had them? Some of us hated them, some of us wrote them, stuck them in a drawer, and never really looked at them, but some financial source, bank, whatever, wanted to see one. Fine. We have all created business plans. They have a purpose. They focus you on looking at your business, evaluating your assets, and knowing what it is that you have and what it is that you need to grow your business. But I ask you, how many of you have developed a leadership plan that can be applied at work or at home? I set out to grow a leader, and I wrote that in my book I'm shamelessly plugging. And I have gotten pretty much everything I wanted out of that idea that I can apply my business acumen onto my personal life and especially my parenting. Speaking to a group of scientists just very recently, I had to acknowledge to them that I am painfully aware that my sample is very small. It's an N of 1, does not a study make. And therefore, I acknowledge that this is just one person. Do I guarantee the success? No. But what have you got to lose? Give it a try and look at your own business acumen and apply it to your own personal relationships and to your parenting. It worked for me, and for me, that was 100% success.
I want to share a passage of a letter that I wrote to my dad and gave to him the morning of my wedding. I wrote it about a week before my wedding day, and in this passage pretty much sums up our relationship and gave me good time for me to get through. Now, a week away, I'm taking a walk down the aisle that will have my number one man walking on my side. The weddings usually represent out with the old and in with the new. I'm blessed to say that my soon-to-be husband is just receiving the passing of a baton from one man who I love to another, because truthfully, nothing really has to change. Our lives are just transitioning harmoniously together. Every day, I cherish the blessing that I was born with, and I can only pray that as I turn a page in my life and start my own family, that it will be half as great prepared as he was. I will then feel that I succeeded.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions we could field from you? Yes.
I would like to know what your upbringing was like and your relationship with your parents. And did you have a single parent or did you have two parents?
It's a very good question. My upbringing was, I'm the oldest of three in a very nuclear family. I was born and raised in Greece, so divorce was not a known thing back then. My father was a single son brought up by his mother and stepfather that he considered as his dad. The parenting style was about, their parenting style, and especially my father's, versus mine, was about 150 years, gap.
It was more of a dictatorship.
It was totally dictatorship on one side, no opportunity to question authority whatsoever, and if I said it, you were going to do it. And though he didn't, speak out of both sides of his mouth frequently, it happened. And if it happened once, your kids will notice it, because they're smarter than you think they are. So what I did is I held onto the good things that he gave all three of us, and kind of peeled away the rest and replenished them with updated information, because again, I'm parenting several years after I was parented, and I'm parenting in a very different country than where I was parented. So what worked here will not work here.
Any other questions?
Any other questions? We do have time for maybe one more question, but we're going a little over, so only one more question, if there is one. I'm wondering if my daughter has a question. I'm really glad you're here, Robin.
She did have a question.
I loved Northeastern because I had gotten myself into, you will probably meet me as the only person you will ever know that applied to 36 different schools. And I did that because I had not a clue of whether or not I was going to get into any of them, so I figured, hey, fill out applications. I got into 36 different schools, including Smith College, because I put my name down as Chris. And that was an all-girls school at that point. Yeah, I know, and I got into some Ivy League programs and so on and so forth, not because I was smart, but because I was a foreign student and they needed the quota to fill. I ended up going to Northeastern because that's the one I could afford, because it was a co-op program. I loved it, and I credit my professional success entirely on what happened there. I am in pharmaceuticals because of a pharmacology professor that I've had at Northeastern, and the camaraderie, the fact that you're in business while you're in school goes a long way.
Well, thank you so much. I have a gift for each of you.
Wonderful.
This is a gift certificate from Parma Spa. It's in Tyson's Corner. It's an amazing spa, an Ayurveda spa. And you can either have a facial or an Ayurveda massage.
Oh my gosh, it's amazing.
Wonderful.
Thank you so
much.
Thank you so much.
Thank
It was
you.
wonderful.